Thank you so much for your kind words, and thanks to the Institute for inviting us here in Dublin. First time we've ever been here, and sadly we have to fly back in the afternoon, but we'll come back in the spring. I'm not going to do a PowerPoint. I'm going to do a very old-fashioned thing, old media, a speech, which might seem odd regarding the subject. We used to do a lot of PowerPoints over the year, garnished with so-called nice music by DJ Adolf or Racial Holy War. Or we used to do something about neo-Nazis beating up migrants, torchings, beheadings even. And presentations like that, dubbed by some the horror show of INACH, they really serve a purpose, but increasingly I like to revert to the good old analog speech, since I have the feeling we're unwittingly glossing over the bare facts with flashy and often gruesome images. So, here we go. When I think of the internet, it often reminds me of the first sentence of Dickens' book, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And indeed, the internet brings us the best and the worst, which is sad but also logical, since it is part of reality of the human experience, and not as it was said back in the day when the internet just took off in America and Europe by the people who were then called cybernauts, the first techies who were surfing the cyber waves. They philosophized that internet was a new reality, a new space. So this new space also called for new rules, but it gives us the option to make a better world, an electronic better world. I wish it could have been, but this obviously was not the case. And on the whole, if you're looking now on the internet and outside of the internet, we're not living in a very kind age. It seems everybody has some negative opinion about anybody, and also relishes in sharing this opinion, often in an aggressive or abusive or foul manner, all in the name of freedom of speech. And the prevalent morality of these times seems to be more hedonistic than freedom-loving. Anything goes is the environment, and decency is seen as something for losers. And logic is deemed to be nonsense, and debates are won by those who scream the loudest, and insulting others has almost become an imperative on the internet. Still, there are a lot of great things on the internet, and things that the internet is used for. And a number of things have become possible through the use of internet, which were never possible before. Since we now firmly established that I'm a cynic, in other words, I'm a disillusioned realist, we can move on to the nitty-gritty, the history of our organization relating to hate on the internet. My organization, Magenta Foundation, was first on the internet in 1994, and that made us the first European NGO in the fields of human rights and non-discrimination to establish a presence there. And within a few months after the internet became somewhat popular in the Netherlands, it was mainly used at that time as a text-only affair, hate was spread by some users with as a low point the posting of the text of the infamous Nazi anthem, the Horst Wessel song. And with that, and with the subsequent actions our organization, Magenta Foundation, took against this, much of the stage was set for things to come on the Dutch part of the internet. And I don't think it was the first time that racist or Nazi material was posted on the net, but it certainly was the first time action was taken against it. At the time, the internet was predominantly American-based, and with this domination also came the whole freedom of speech American-style discussion. And for years after the public debate on the issue of cyberhate would indeed be dominated by those who wanted the net to be a total free haven where anything should go, and those who rightly claimed that Auschwitz was built on words and not on bricks in the first place. Coming from a European country that has a strong legislation on racial hatred, discrimination and hate speech, a logical step for us was to create the first complaints bureau for discrimination on the internet, or hotline, it's also called by some, but we try to avoid that term since hotline means sex line in French. It really doesn't go well with a lot of people. And it took until 1997 for our Complaints Bureau, or MDI as we call it, to start operations. Our working method, it's pretty simple. We receive a complaint from an internet user by email about possible discriminatory material on the internet. We investigate it. Is the material still online? Is it on the Dutch part of the internet, or is it abroad but directed at Dutch society and written in the Dutch language? Is it in our view illegal? We assess it, we look at the law. If the answer to all those questions is yes, we send a so-called request to remove to the author or the owner of the material. And we explain to the author or the owner why the material is deemed illegal by us. We cite the relevant articles of the Dutch Penal Code, and we inform the offender that if the material is not removed, we may take legal action by filing a report with the police authorities or the prosecutor's office. So we go after the author or the owner of the material, and we hardly ever hold internet service providers or hosting providers accountable. Even though the new EU e-commerce directive, which charges member states to create a notice and takedown procedure in cooperation with the internet industry, even though that is now in force in the Netherlands and also in a number of other European countries, we keep on using our working method since it has shown to be highly successful. On average, 95% of the material we deem to be illegal is removed by the owner of the author after we prompt them. We aim for the removal of the material. We are not some machine that files complaints with the authorities. Although at times we need to, if material is not removed. And over the last 12 years, we have filed some 60 complaints with the Dutch Attorney's Office, of which some 25 led to successful prosecution and conviction. And we need those convictions to show that if users do not comply with our request to remove, there will be consequences. During the first year of its existence, the Complaints Bureau received 105 complaints. We had a staff of precisely one person, and we received 5,000 part-time, yes, and we received 5,000 euros of funding from the Dutch government. Nowadays, the number of complaints is on average 1,300 per year. We have a staff of 5, of which 1 legal expert, and our annual budget is about 160,000 euros. The Complaints Bureau is now a division of Magenta Foundation with its own office and coordinator. It's highly effective and works closely together with the Dutch Attorney's Office, with the National Expertise Center on Discrimination of the Attorney's Office, with Dutch local and national police, with the Dutch National Counter-Terrorism Coordination, and many others. We also do workshops and training with the Dutch police and prosecutors. I have to state, we are not cyber cops. We do not patrol the internet looking for people that put discriminatory content there. At times we play detective, but we only work on the basis of received complaints. If we would patrol the internet for hate, we simply would need a staff of 100 and a few million euros, so that's not going. Since we all know that only upholding the law does in the end not really bring a solution, we also move into new directions. And during the last 4 years, we have trained moderators of web forums on how to recognize and deal with discriminatory material. We annually, for instance, train the forum moderators of the largest newspaper in the Netherlands, the Telegraaf, and the result is that a whole lot less complaints are generated about this forum. We are constantly aware of and try to anticipate new developments on the internet. And over the years we have seen illegal content move from media on the internet like Usenet, the so-called news groups, to more modern applications like blogs, weblogs, and web forums. And we noted how the development of, as it's called, a Web 2.0 interactive social networking sites, like MySpace and Facebook, and video repositories like YouTube, made it easier for users to post material, including hate. And my prediction for the coming year is that Twitter, for those of you who are aware of the existence of that, will be increasingly used by extremists for propaganda, communication, and command and control purposes. A growing number of young people from very different backgrounds are attracted to extremist views, and the internet caters for most of their needs. Presently, anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, hate against Muslims, and hate against homosexuals make up a large part of all the online hate in the Netherlands, mainly being disseminated through forums and weblogs. It is material that promotes violence, denies historical facts, poisons and recruits young people. And today's hatred on the internet has a larger breeding ground, perpetrator group and audience than ever before. And it is no longer only to be linked to neo-Nazis or right-wing extremists. Ultra-left-wing groups and extremist Muslim groups also engage in spreading anti-Semitism, for instance, or Holocaust denial. And hate against non-Muslims is also an issue, and recruitment for jihad. Lastly, on the internet, hate speech against white indigenous Dutch, which has never been a real problem, is slowly growing over the last few years. But really the main problem right now is the mainstream. There's a vast group of unaffiliated citizens, internet users, who post discriminatory or racist material on normal web forums and weblogs, and they're often airing populist views on migration, minorities, Islam, Jews, others, and that has become an excellent breeding ground also for extreme parties or groups and for the new so-called respectable populist parties that we see in the Netherlands but also in other European countries. Why should we fight online hate? In my view, online hate claws at the fabric of society and is trying to take over all the time. It causes violence, murder, abuse, war, and terror. It distorts thinking. It pits us against each other, and it wants to balkanize us. And it is not a banal or a harmless evil. Ultimately, it wants to do away with democracy and murder those it does not like. And here we must keep in mind that we cannot force democratic values upon people. That would be counter to the principles of democracy. But at the same time, democracy is not an automaton. It is extremely fragile. It does not procreate by itself. It needs to be taught to people, and it needs to be nurtured, needs maintenance all the time. So how about free speech? Should it not be total and limitless? Isn't that what freedom and democracy is about? First of all, total free speech does not exist. Even the United States Constitution knows limits to freedom of speech. Secondly, should we, in the name of free speech and democracy, put no limits on speech at all? Should we allow hate and extremism to grow unchallenged? Then this could bring about the very end of democracy. A dictatorial regime will take over, and as its first act, it will abolish free speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Ronald.